Have you ever put your heart into something, only to feel invisible when it mattered most? Outside, the last hints of a golden New Jersey afternoon stretch across rows of brick townhouses, their windows glowing with the promise of evening. The city hums beyond the Peretti family's quiet street. Distant sirens, a bus sighing at the curb, the chatter of neighbors carrying groceries up cracked front steps. But inside apartment 3B, another kind of energy simmers, a warmth carefully cultivated by Liana Peretti, who, for hours, has been orchestrating a small masterpiece. Liana stands at the kitchen counter, her hands dusted with flour, sleeves rolled up past her elbows. The kitchen is alive with color and scent, a bubbling pot of tomato sauce on the stove, sprigs of fresh basil wilting in a glass of water, and a loaf of crusty bread cooling atop a checkered towel. Sunlight filters through clean, streaked windows, glinting off the polished table set for four, a crisp white cloth, mismatched but beloved plates, and her grandmother's silverware, brought out for special occasions. She takes a moment to breathe. The sauce, sweet and savory, fills the apartment with its aroma. Liana checks the time. Her heart quickens. She wants everything perfect. She hums to herself as she arranges slices of mozzarella atop the eggplant, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. Every detail matters tonight, as if this meal could somehow stitch the week's frayed edges back together. In the living room, Anthony sprawls on the floor, colored pencils scattered around his homework. He mutters numbers under his breath, occasionally glancing at a soccer ball propped in the corner. Julia, perched at the end of the couch, doesn't look up from her phone, thumbs tapping rapidly. The faint buzz of a group chat drowns out Liana's soft humming. It's nearly 7 when Liana wipes her hands, smooths her apron, and calls out, "Dinner in 5 minutes." Her voice is gentle, but there's hope woven in, a hope for laughter, for stories, for the kind of togetherness she's imagined all afternoon. The front door opens with a click and a gust of city air. Marco enters, briefcase in hand, tie loosened, phone already pressed to his ear. Liana's heart lifts, just a little. She meets him in the hallway, offering a smile and a kiss on the cheek. He squeezes her shoulder, distracted, mouthing, "Just a second," as he listens to the voice in his earbud. She glances past Marco at her children. "Anthony, Julia, wash your hands, please. Let's get ready to eat." Julia sighs, still scrolling. "In a sec, Mom." Anthony scribbles an answer, then shuffles to the bathroom, dragging his feet. Liana arranges the last serving dish, a platter of golden eggplant parmesan, at the center of the table. She lights a single candle, the scent of vanilla mingling with garlic and basil. For a moment, she stands back, taking in the scene, a table filled with love, a home filled with her efforts. Everyone gathers, slowly, phones reluctantly set aside, homework pushed under a chair. Marco sits, still glancing at his phone, fingers twitching as if itching to reply to an email. Julia pokes at her salad, earbuds dangling from her ears. Anthony, hungry, shovels pasta onto his plate, sauce staining his white t-shirt. Liana serves everyone, her movements practiced and graceful. She waits, searching for someone to notice. She hopes for a simple, "Wow, this looks amazing," or "Thanks, Mom." The silence is filled instead with the clinking of forks and the distant hum of the city outside. Marco finally looks up, distracted. "Smells good, honey." He doesn't meet her eyes before glancing back at his phone. Julia mutters, "Can I have water?" And Anthony, mouth full, asks, "Can I have more bread?" Liana smiles and nods, standing to fetch the pitcher. She watches them, her family, the people she loves most, lost in their own worlds. She tries to join the conversation, asking Julia about her day at school, but Julia shrugs, mumbles, and turns back to her phone as soon as she's able. Marco responds to a work text, apologizing, "Just a minute, urgent." Anthony launches into a story about a goal he almost scored at recess, but his words tumble over Marco's side comments and Julia's laughter at something only she can see on her screen. The meal passes in a blur of half-finished stories and distracted nods. Liana quietly refills glasses, clears plates, and wipes crumbs from the tablecloth. No one seems to notice the fresh herbs, the hours spent in the kitchen, the care in every detail. Her smile, so bright at the start of dinner, begins to tremble at the corners. She blinks rapidly, willing herself not to cry. Outside, darkness settles over the city. A breeze rattles the window pane, carrying muffled sounds of life beyond their apartment. Liana stands by the sink, washing dishes as the others drift away. Marco back to his laptop, Julia to her bedroom, Anthony to his video game. The kitchen, once filled with warmth, now feels achingly empty. She looks down at her hands, pink from dishwater, and lets out a quiet sigh. The silence presses in, heavy and unyielding. She wonders if anyone noticed the extra effort. The homemade bread, the hand-rolled pasta, the carefully set table. Did any of it matter? A soft knock at the back door startles her. Mrs. Rosa Carbone, her elderly neighbor, appears with a gentle smile and a covered plate in her hands. "I made too many biscotti," Mrs. Carbone says, her voice warm and comforting. "Thought you and the kids might like some for dessert." Liana forces a grateful smile, fighting the tightness in her chest. "Thank you, Mrs. Carbone. That's so thoughtful of you." She tries to keep her voice steady, masking the disappointment that weighs on her. Mrs. Carbone lingers in the doorway, her eyes kind but searching. "You look tired, dear. Everything all right?" she asks softly. Liana hesitates, then nods. "Just a long day, that's all." She doesn't dare say more. After Mrs. Carbone leaves, Liana stands in the glow of the kitchen light, alone with her thoughts. She gathers the leftover dishes, wrapping them carefully. She wipes the table one last time, her movements slow and deliberate. She looks toward the hallway, where laughter from Anthony's video game floats back to her, and the faint, comforting clatter of Julia's music plays behind a closed door. Marco's voice murmurs from the living room, still wrapped up in work. Liana presses her hands to her cheeks, feeling the heat of unshed tears. She gazes at the candle flickering on the table, wax pooling at its base. She wonders if she should say something, if she should tell her family how much this meant to her, how invisible she felt tonight. Her eyes well up, but she blinks the tears away, forcing a smile in case anyone comes back. She swallows her pain, tucks it deep inside, and quietly finishes cleaning. As she turns off the kitchen light, her reflection glimmers briefly in the glass, eyes shining, lips pressed together in a determined line. She whispers to herself, "Tomorrow will be better." But the ache lingers, heavy and silent. Would you have said something, or just kept smiling? Sometimes the hardest battles are fought in silence, behind a smile, in the quiet of a kitchen, when all you want is to be seen. The camera lingers on Liana's face, her eyes glistening with emotion, as the world outside her window moves on, unaware. The screen gently fades out, inviting viewers to reflect on their own moments of invisibility and leaving the question hanging in the air. The morning after that quiet, overlooked dinner, sunlight streams past the faded floral curtains in the Peretti kitchen. The clatter of Marco's mug on the counter, the hurried shuffle of Julia's sneakers as she hunts for her backpack, and Anthony's sleepy protest about breakfast blend into the familiar soundtrack of Liana's life. She moves between them almost invisibly, refilling orange juice, flipping scrambled eggs, and making sure lunchboxes are zipped and ready. Her hands work automatically, but her mind drifts back to the night before, the smiles she searched for, the thank you she never heard. Marco's phone buzzes beside his plate. He glances at the screen, then at his watch. "I've got to run. Traffic's been awful on the parkway," he says, pressing a quick kiss to Liana's cheek. She offers him a gentle smile, but inside, she feels hollow. Julia barely looks up from her phone, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her group chat. Anthony, hunched over his cereal, asks if he can play video games after school. Liana nods. She watches her family scatter into the day, leaving behind half-drunk coffee, crumbs, and a silence that settles over the kitchen like a thin film. Once the apartment is quiet, Liana gathers the plates, sighing softly as she stacks them in the sink. She wipes down the table with slow, deliberate strokes, her thoughts looping back to the previous evening, the hours spent simmering sauce, rolling out pasta, setting the table with her grandmother's linen napkins. She remembers glancing at each face, hoping to catch a spark of delight, or at least a word of gratitude. Nothing, not even a nod. She'd told herself not to mind, but the ache lingers. Later that morning, Liana steps out into the crisp air with her reusable shopping bags, heading down the block toward Carbone's market. The sidewalk is busy with neighbors and delivery trucks, but Liana walks quietly through it all, unnoticed by the world. At the corner, she spots Mrs. Rosa Carbone leaning on her cane, standing near the faded blue awning of the family grocery. Rosa's eyes, sharp and kind, flicker up as Liana approaches. "Buongiorno, Liana," Rosa calls, her voice warm. "Good morning, Mrs. Carbone," Liana replies, offering a small smile. Rosa watches her for a moment, noticing the tiredness in Liana's eyes. "You look a little worn out, dear. Everything all right?" Liana hesitates, forced by the gentle inquiry to find her own answer. "Oh, you know how it is. Family keeps me busy." She tries to sound cheerful, but the words come out thin. Rosa nods, understanding more than Liana says. "Busy is good, but don't forget to take care of yourself too. Sometimes we women work so hard, but it's important to pause and breathe, even just for 5 minutes." Liana blushes, caught off guard by the kindness. Thank you. I'll try. Inside Carbone's market, she moves through the aisles, carefully selecting the freshest tomatoes, basil, and a loaf of crusty bread, determined even now to make dinner special. She lingers near the cheese counter, overhearing a cheerful exchange between another shopper and the young clerk. The customer thanks him for his help, and he beams, "Of course. Let me know if you need anything else." Liana can't remember the last time anyone, outside of Mrs. Carbone, noticed her efforts. Back home, sunlight pours through the window as Liana lines up her groceries on the counter. She glances at her phone. Not a single message from Marco or the kids. No, thank you for breakfast. No, thinking of you. She sighs, then shakes her head, trying to brush it off. Still, the feeling lingers, heavy and persistent. By late afternoon, the apartment buzzes with the return of the family. Anthony bursts in, track dirt on his shoes, waving a crumpled math worksheet. "Mom, look, I got a sticker today," he shouts, holding the paper high. Liana's heart swells, and she kneels to ruffle his hair. "That's wonderful, honey. I'm proud of you." Julia trails behind, earbuds in, scrolling through social media. She drops her backpack by the couch and disappears into her room without a word. Marco arrives shortly after, juggling his briefcase and laptop bag. He sets them down and heads straight for the kitchen, sniffing the air. "Smells amazing in here," he says, peering over Liana's shoulder as she stirs a bubbling pot of minestrone. "Just trying something new," Liana says, searching his face for a reaction. Marco wraps an arm around her waist, but his eyes flick to his phone as it buzzes again. "Sorry, work's crazy today. I'll be right back." He slips away, taking a call in the hallway. Dinner is ready minutes later. Liana sets the table again, placing a sprig of fresh basil on each bowl, lighting the small candle in the center. Details nobody asked for, but she can't help herself. The family gathers, their conversation fragmented. Anthony excitedly recounts his soccer practice. Julia mutters about an upcoming quiz. Marco scrolls through emails between forkfuls. Liana listens, trying to interject, but her words float above the noise, never quite landing. Halfway through the meal, Liana clears her throat. "Did anyone notice the bread?" "I tried a new recipe." Anthony shrugs. "It's good, Mom." He wipes his mouth and asks if he can be excused. Julia glances up, nods indifferently, then returns to her phone. Marco, oblivious, mumbles, "Yeah, thanks, honey," eyes glued to his screen. Liana's chest tightens. She forces a smile and nods, but disappointment creeps into her voice. "Glad you like it." She watches as plates empty, conversation fades, and each person drifts away from the table, leaving her alone with the candle flickering in the center, the only acknowledgement of her effort. After cleaning up, Liana lingers in the quiet kitchen. She glances at the clock, nearly 8. The world outside is settling into night, windows glowing across the street. She stands by the sink, staring at her reflection in the window. Is this what it means to be a good wife and mother? Is it selfish to want more? Her hands tremble slightly as she dries the last plate. Later, while folding laundry in the living room, she hears Marco in the hallway. He pokes his head in, phone in hand. "Hey, Liana, you seem tired lately. Why don't you just order pizza next time? It'd be easier for everyone." Liana looks up, surprised by his suggestion. "I like cooking for you all. She trails off, unsure how to finish. Marco shrugs, not catching the deeper meaning. "Just don't burn yourself out, okay?" He smiles and disappears into their bedroom. Liana sits in silence, surrounded by piles of clean clothes. The words she wants to say, about feeling invisible, about wanting appreciation, catch in her throat. She wonders if Marco would understand, or if he'd just tell her to rest. The next day, Liana takes Anthony to the park after school. He runs ahead, chasing his soccer ball across the grass. Liana sits on a bench, watching the other parents chat in small groups. She feels separate from them, her own struggles invisible. Her phone buzzes with a message from Julia. "Can you pick up some snacks for my project?" Liana replies, "Of course, sweetheart, but there's no thank you." On the way home, Liana stops at Carbone's market again. Mrs. Carbone is outside, tending to her window boxes. "Good afternoon, Liana. How are you today?" Rosa asks, eyes kind. Liana hesitates, then shrugs. "I'm all right. Just tired, I guess." Rosa nods knowingly. "You know, when my children were young, I felt like a ghost sometimes. I'd cook, clean, help with homework, but no one noticed unless something was missing. But you are not invisible, my dear. Even if they forget to say thank you, your love is felt." Liana feels a lump in her throat. "Thank you, Mrs. Carbone. I needed to hear that." Rosa squeezes her hand gently. "Remember to speak up when your heart feels heavy. Your family loves you, but sometimes they need a little reminder." That evening, Liana makes a simple dinner: roasted vegetables, pasta, a salad with fresh herbs. She tries not to expect anything, just focuses on being present. The family eats, distracted as always. When dinner is over, Liana stands in the kitchen, staring at the empty plates and wondering if things will ever change. She finds herself doubting her own worth, questioning if it's wrong to want recognition. Is she failing as a mother if she admits her disappointment? Is she selfish for wanting to be seen? The weight of her unspoken feelings grows, pressing in from all sides. She thinks of Mrs. Carbone's words, the small comfort they offered, but she can't shake the sadness settling in her chest. As she turns off the kitchen light, Liana glances back at the table, her silent stage of nightly effort, and sighs. Maybe tomorrow, she tells herself. Maybe tomorrow they'll notice. Have you ever felt unappreciated for your efforts at home? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to follow Liana's journey as she searches for the recognition every heart deserves. The rain began around 4 in the afternoon, tapping softly at the kitchen window as Liana perched on a wooden stool, her apron dusted with flour and her hands idle for once. The city outside had surrendered to a gray drizzle, blurring the neat rows of houses and bathing the street in a gentle hush. Inside, the Peretti home was warm, almost too warm, from the oven working overtime. The air was thick with the smell of roasted garlic, tomato sauce, and the faint sweetness of the birthday cake she had hidden away, just for Marco. This was not any dinner. For days, Liana had planned Marco's birthday, quietly sketching menus in the margins of her grocery lists and hiding bags beneath the kitchen sink so the children wouldn't spot the surprises. She had spent the afternoon rolling tiny meatballs, arranging them in neat lines on a baking sheet, and stirring the risotto until her arm ached. The table was set with their best dishes and real cloth napkins, blue, Marco's favorite color. She glanced at the clock, 5:30. Julia was sprawled on the couch, still in her school sweatshirt, her thumbs flying across her phone screen. Anthony knelt in front of the TV, the soccer game's volume barely muted. The apartment was filled with the ordinary sounds of family, but Liana's anticipation was anything but ordinary. At 6, Marco's key turned in the lock with its familiar scrape. Liana's heart leapt, and she wiped her hands on her apron. She heard him laugh, a tired, muffled sound, as he set his briefcase down and hung his coat. He stepped into the kitchen, rainwater sparkling on his hair. "Happy birthday," Liana said, trying to keep her voice light and hopeful. She opened her arms, but Marco's phone buzzed before he could reach her. He checked the screen, his brow furrowing. "1 second, babe. Work. Sorry." He pressed the phone to his ear, mouthing a quick, "Thank you." He retreated into the hallway, already deep in conversation. The children shuffled to the table, Julia barely looking up as she slid into her seat. Anthony peered at the platters, his eyes lighting up at the sight of meatballs. Liana hovered, pouring water, straightening napkins, waiting for Marco to return so she could light the candle and sing. But the hallway echoed with his low voice for another 10 minutes, then 15. Liana forced a smile as Anthony reached for a roll. "Wait for Papa, sweetie," she whispered. "He's always on the phone," Julia muttered, not unkindly, but with the weary knowledge of someone who had waited before. The food cooled. The risotto, once creamy, thickened into a heavy mass. Liana's hands trembled as she spooned sauce over the meatballs, her jaw tight. At last, Marco emerged, rubbing his neck. "I'm so sorry, everyone. Let's eat, okay?" He managed a quick smile, but his eyes flicked to his phone, which he placed face up beside his plate. The family ate in a hush broken only by Anthony's contented munching and Julia's occasional sigh. Marco picked at his food, distracted, nodding absently when Liana asked if he liked the meal. When the time came for the cake, Liana set it down, the single candle flickering bravely. "Happy birthday to you," she sang, her voice thin but steady. Anthony joined in, Julia half-heartedly. Marco smiled, blew out the candle, his phone buzzing again before he could taste the cake. The party lasted all of 8 minutes. Marco excused himself for another work call. The children cleared their plates without being asked, an act of politeness that only emphasized the silence left behind. Liana stood at the sink, her back to the dining room, hands submerged in soapy water. The sound of the rain tapped a steady rhythm on the glass. She waited for the tears, but they did not come. Instead, a flat numbness settled in her chest. After the children had done their homework and Marco's laughter trickled back from the bedroom, he was watching a funny video on his phone now. Liana slipped out into the hallway, clutching a small umbrella. The night was wet and cool, puddles reflecting the yellow glow of the streetlights. She made her way next door to Mrs. Carbone's apartment, pausing to collect the plastic grocery bag Mrs. Carbone had left on the stoop earlier. too heavy for her to carry in alone. The old woman opened her door with a warm smile, her silver hair pulled back beneath a blue scarf. Her apartment smelled faintly of lavender and old books. "Buonasera, cara," Mrs. Carbone greeted, her voice soft and inviting. She took the bag with a grateful nod, ushering Liana inside. Liana hesitated in the entryway, suddenly aware of the exhaustion in her bones. "Do you need help putting these away?" she asked, more to fill the silence than out of real necessity. Mrs. Carbone nodded, and together, they arranged cans and vegetables on the counter. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet was different here, less heavy, more accepting. Finally, Mrs. Carbone broke the silence. "You seem tired, Liana." "More than usual." Liana paused, her hands resting on a can of tomatoes. "Just a long day," she said, but her voice wavered. Mrs. Carbone's eyes were sharp, kind. "Is it your family, or you?" Liana's breath caught. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but the words tangled in her throat. She pressed her lips together, ashamed. Mrs. Carbone reached for her hand. "Let me tell you something, dear. When I was your age, I thought the only way to keep peace in my home was to keep quiet. I cooked, I cleaned, I smiled, even when my heart was heavy. My late husband, rest his soul, was a good man, but he never noticed the small things. Not until I found my voice." Liana looked at her, startled. "What happened?" "I told him," Mrs. Carbone said, her gaze unwavering. "Not in anger, not to hurt him. I told him how it felt, doing everything and hearing nothing. He didn't know. He truly didn't. Most people don't, unless you show them." Liana blinked back sudden tears, her chest tight. She envied Mrs. Carbone's composure, her certainty. "I don't want to make anyone feel bad," she whispered. "You're not," Mrs. Carbone soothed. "You're giving them a chance to see you. Isn't that what you deserve?" The clock on Mrs. Carbone's wall ticked quietly. The rain had tapered to a gentle patter. Liana nodded, her throat aching. "I'm afraid they'll think I'm ungrateful, or too much." Mrs. Carbone smiled sadly. "We all fear that, but you are not too much. You are a person, not a shadow in your own home." Liana squeezed her hand, warmth blooming in her chest amid the ache. "Thank you, Mrs. Carbone," she said softly. I needed to hear that. When Liana let herself back into her apartment, she found it quiet. The children were in their rooms. Marco was at his desk, the blue glow of his computer screen painting his face in pale light. She watched him for a moment, her heart fluttering with nervous energy. She thought of Mrs. Carbone's words, of the years slipping by in silence. That night, Liana barely slept. She replayed the dinner over and over in her mind, the careful planning, the ignored candle, the constant interruptions. Her feelings shifted from sadness to frustration, and then finally, to resolve. She could not keep folding herself smaller and smaller. She would give them a chance to see her. The next evening, as the rain gave way to a golden sunset, Liana cooked again. Not a feast, just a simple meal, pasta with peas and parmesan, salad with lemon. She set the table quietly, then called everyone in. Marco appeared first, distracted but smiling. Julia followed, headphones around her neck, and Anthony, bouncing a soccer ball on his hip. Liana waited until they were seated, then sat down herself, folding her hands in her lap. She took a shaky breath. "Before we eat, I want to say something." The children glanced at each other, surprised. Marco looked up from his phone. Liana's voice was soft but steady. "I know we're all busy. I know everyone has things on their mind, but I put a lot of heart into our dinners, not just for birthdays, but every day. I do it because I love you, and because it's how I show care. When it goes unnoticed, I feel invisible. Like I don't matter." Her hands trembled. She looked at Marco, then at the children. "It hurts. I need you to see me, to see what I do, not just as something that's supposed to happen, but as something that takes time and effort. I need to feel appreciated, too." A stunned silence followed. Anthony's eyes widened. Julia took off her headphones, setting them on the table. Marco's face softened, confusion giving way to concern. "Liana, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you felt that way. I guess I just took it for granted. Work has been crazy, and I know that's not an excuse. Thank you for telling me." Liana nodded, her vision blurring with tears, not of pain, but of relief. No one spoke for a moment. Then Julia reached across the table, her hand covering Liana's. "Your dinners are the best part of my day," she said quietly. "I'm sorry I didn't say it before." Anthony piped up, earnest and anxious. "Me too, Mama. Can I help you cook next time?" Liana smiled through her tears, overwhelmed by the gentle warmth that filled the room. For the first time in months, she felt seen, truly seen, by the people she loved most. Marco stood and came around the table, hugging her tightly. Thank you for everything, Liana. We'll do better, I promise. The golden light spilled through the window, illuminating the small family gathered close. The meal was simple, but every plate was cleared, every bite savored. Liana's heart eased as she realized she had not lost anything by speaking. She had only made more room for honesty and for love. And as the last rays of the sun vanished behind the row houses, Liana understood. Sometimes the greatest act of care is to let yourself be seen. A heavy silence lingered in the Peretti household after Liana's confession at the dinner table. She had spoken quietly, but her words hung in the air, undeniable and honest. Her voice trembling only slightly as she admitted how invisible she sometimes felt, how much she longed for a simple thank you, a smile, or a moment of attention from her family. She didn't demand apologies or dramatic gestures. She simply told the truth. The first to react was Anthony. His fork clattered against his plate, the noise startling in the hush. "Mom, I'm sorry," he blurted, eyes wide, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I didn't know you wanted us to, say something or—" He trailed off, searching for the right words, suddenly aware that his mother's efforts were not the invisible magic he'd always taken for granted. Julia, who'd been half scrolling through her phone under the table, looked up and set the device aside. Her face softened, the usual preteen air of detachment replaced by something more vulnerable. "I'm sorry too, Mom," she said, her voice quiet. I thought you liked doing all this. I didn't think you needed us to notice." Liana smiled gently. "I do love it," she replied, her eyes glistening. "I love making things special for you, but sometimes I just want to know it matters, that it makes a difference." Marco, whose phone vibrated with yet another work email, finally placed it face down. He looked at Liana, really looked, as if seeing her anew. The lines of stress around his mouth softened. "I've been selfish," he admitted, his tone low. "I get so caught up in work and what's going on outside this house that I forget what's happening right in front of me. I'm sorry, Liana. You do so much for us. For me." He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Thank you, for everything." A silence followed, different now, warm, full of meaning. Liana felt her breath ease. She'd feared that speaking up would cause conflict or be dismissed, but instead it opened a new space between them. Not a perfect one, but a real one. The days that followed didn't transform the Peretti family overnight, but small changes took root. The very next evening, Liana found a note on her pillow in Anthony's messy handwriting. "Thanks for the lasagna, Mom. You make the best food in the world." It was scribbled on the back of a soccer flyer, but it made her heart swell. Julia, hesitant at first, began lingering in the kitchen as Liana cooked. "Can I help with the salad?" she asked one night, her tone casual but hopeful. Together, they chopped tomatoes and cucumbers, sharing stories about school and friends, laughter bubbling between them in a way that felt new. Marco, for his part, started coming home earlier when he could. He silenced his phone at dinner time, making it a ritual to ask about everyone's day before the first bite was taken. Some evenings, he even brought home flowers from the corner bodega, a small, thoughtful gesture, a reminder that he was paying attention. One Saturday, the whole family visited the neighborhood farmers market together. The sky was bright, the air tinged with spring. Liana led them to her favorite tomato vendor, explaining how to pick the ripest ones. Anthony darted between stalls, searching for the best loaf of bread, while Julia picked out fresh basil. Marco carried their bags, joking about his rookie status. They returned home with arms full of ingredients and hearts a little lighter. That evening, as they sat around the table, the meal was simple: pasta with fresh sauce, bread torn by hand, a salad tossed with olive oil, and laughter. No one checked their phone. No one rushed away. In the golden light of sunset, Liana felt something shift. She wasn't invisible anymore, but it wasn't just her family that changed. Liana herself began to see her own worth differently. She realized that being a good wife and mother didn't mean sacrificing her needs for acknowledgement or connection. She deserved to be seen, not just as the person who made dinner, but as Liana, creative, loving, and human. She started carving out time for herself too. A weekly walk in the park, where she listened to her favorite music. Coffee dates with Mrs. Carbone, who became both confidant and friend. Liana even signed up for a local cooking class, something she'd always wanted but never prioritized. Sharing her passion with others, she felt her confidence bloom in new ways. One evening, after another joyful family meal, Liana stood on the apartment's small balcony, the city lights winking in the distance. Mrs. Carbone waved from her window across the street, and Liana waved back, smiling. She thought of how far she'd come, not just in being noticed, but in noticing herself. The world outside was noisy and unpredictable, but inside her heart, there was peace. Back in the kitchen, Marco gathered the plates while Anthony and Julia cleared the table. Liana watched them, her family moving around each other with a new sense of awareness. It wasn't perfect. There were still arguments about chores, forgotten homework, and the relentless tug of busy schedules. But now there was also gratitude, spoken and unspoken, woven into the fabric of their daily lives. As the evening drew to a close, Liana sat with her family in the soft glow of the dining room. Marco squeezed her hand, Julia leaned against her shoulder, and Anthony grinned, a smear of sauce on his chin. Liana felt seen, loved, and valued, not for the meals she made or the chores she finished, but for who she was. And maybe, she realized, that was the most important confession of all, that it's okay to want recognition, to need kindness, to ask for help. That speaking up isn't selfish. It's the first step toward genuine connection. So, as you sit with this story, I want to ask you, have you ever felt invisible in your own home, your efforts overlooked, your care taken for granted? What would it mean for you to be truly seen, not just for what you do, but for who you are? Let's keep this conversation going. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced something like Liana? How did you find your voice? Or how would you like to? Your story could give strength to someone else watching right now. If you found yourself rooting for Liana, or if her journey reminded you of someone you care about, don't forget to give this video a like. And if you want to join a community where real stories like this matter, make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss a story that speaks to your heart. Because sometimes, the smallest changes, an honest conversation, a handwritten note, a shared meal, can transform a family. And it all starts with the courage to speak up. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for being part of this story. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember to see the people who love you, right there at your table.